But the compass story was we were travelling down the river in a boat that was being broken up. And this was to make a story which you will now tell me what it was, where all the monsters came out of the deck.
Carnival of Monsters.
Carnival, thank you very much indeed. Carnival of Monsters. And as we were going down, I spoke to the fellow who was in charge. We were being towed down the river, actually. We weren't going under power, because we hadn't got any engines. And I said to the fellow in charge, when you break all this up, are you going to need all these brass hooks that are hanging on the doors, or are you going to need these little, lovely little mahogany shelves and cupboards? And he said, no, they're used to that, it's all going to be crushed up. And I said, well, can we have a few of them? He said, help yourselves. So out came my small bag that I always carry. And I took off brass hooks. My whole house is covered with beautiful brass hooks and eyes that hold the doors open, and I've got beautiful cupboards for the keys and everything. All out of this ship. Katie Manning was going around bashing things with a hammer. Roger was taking things. Everybody was taking things off this boat. Well, when we got into the boat when we left, we were going into the picket boat, we were just going ashore when a man rushed up to Barry Letts, the producer, and went, Barry said, oh no. And he said, Barry said, all right. Look, come on, fellas, don't let's be stupid. I mean, somebody's taken the ship's compass. He said, I told you earlier on, he said, don't take the ship's compass. Now, I'd been up before, and I hadn't heard him say, don't take the ship's compass. But I did hear him say, don't touch the binnacle, which is the big brass thing that the ship's compass is in. But when I was in the bridge, I looked at the back, and there was a bench. I lifted up the bench, and there was a bit of wood at the bottom with a hole in the middle. Now, if you've ever been in the Navy, you know that anything that has a hole in the middle, you put your finger in and pull, there's something underneath it. And so I lifted it up, and there was a lovely new brass compass, a priceless piece. It went back to about 1804. It's a really old brass compass, and sitting in a box, and I thought, fantastic, they don't know it's there. So I took the compass and I put it in my bag, and I went and I had it there, and Barry Letts said, no, I don't believe it. Somebody's taken the compass. And then he looked round for me and he went, and he looked me straight in the eye, and I went, so he went. So I said, Barry, I've got just left something behind. I'll put him in. And I had this bag. This thing weighed about 100 weight. And I staggered back, went into the bridge, lifted up the box at the back, put the brass compass back, and went back into the boat and waited. 10 minutes went by, quarter of an hour went by, and this man again rushed up to Barry and said, I don't believe it. And he looked at me and went, and I went, and he said, no, he said, it's been returned. And the man said, on the contrary, it hasn't been returned. He said, somebody's stolen the binnacle and the compass. And, you know, it wasn't my one at all. And I put the bloody thing back. They didn't even know mine existed, and I'd returned it, and somebody had stolen the real one out of the binnacle. And we never to this day found out who pinched it.
Did you get the old one?
Did I get the old one? No, I just said I put it back.
Oh, you should have taken it again.
I was too tired. Over there. No, but they don't speak English, do they?
How did you find working with all the other doctors on the 5 Doctors? Was it an enjoyable time?
Absolutely marvellous. Pat Troughton, although everybody thinks we're at war, because we started this thing in the Doctor Who, we started it in the 3 Doctors, we started this sort of hate thing. And it built up and developed, and not in conferences we behave disgracefully and we throw water at each other. We carry on allowing it. That's all of he's a great personal friend. And so we get on terribly well anyway. Peter Davison and I get on very well. We all get on very well. But if you remember the 5 Doctors, we didn't actually appear with each other that much. It was only the last final scene, the sort of denouement, where Peter gets us all together, if you remember, that we ever really met up. But working with Liz, again, was like working with her as I worked with her the day before. I mean, we went back up this damn mountain in Wales where we froze to death, and I got behind the wheel of old Bessie, which was great again to be behind this car that I'd driven thousands of miles all over England building and so on.
Did you steal that?
What? No, I'm afraid the BBC have got that. But that's just as well, because when I want to borrow it, I just ring up and it's there, and they look after it. The Whomobile is mine. I invented the Whomobile, and I built the Whomobile and designed it with another designer. And we built that, and that was in several Doctor Who's, you know, well, not that many, but enough for it to become a very famous piece. And still living and looked after by a young man who tows it to any venue where I might want. But the answer to your question is, we all got on very, very well indeed. Unfortunately, you know, Tom Baker didn't want to work with us, and so we had to use a bit of film with him, so we didn't get a chance to work with him. Over there. Yes, young sir.
What's the doctor's name?
Where does the doctor sleep?
What's the doctor's name?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What's his name? Doctor's real name?
Dr. John Smith. If you remember, the only time I was ever asked that question was by the Brigadier, the first one that I did. And he said, what? You just saw it, did you? Well, do you remember? And he asked me, he said, you know, what is your name? Or I forgot what the question was. And I said, Smith. Dr. John Smith. I don't suppose it's true at